Hello from summer in Montana. Moab and I are out in the camper van enjoying the rivers and the mountains, but I want to stay connected with you through the podcast. So as we are here in the middle of season 4, I am bringing back some of my favorite episodes, a few Encore episodes from the early days, perhaps before you were here joining me and hearing the stories that give us hope and really show the way of what a good divorce can look like and sound like. So enjoy. Thanks for hanging out with me and wishing you the best for a better and brighter divorce. Hello and welcome. I'm Karen McNenny, author, mediator, co-parent specialist, and divorce consultant. And this is The Good Divorce Show, where we don't just talk about how to get divorced, but how to be divorced. Divorce is not a weapon. It's a tool. And when used well, it can be a tool for transformation. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to The Good Divorce Show. I'm your host, Karen McNenny, and we are here to help guide families, couples, individuals through a divorce journey that feels less destructive with less debt. And today I have with me a couple that was really an inspiration in my journey, Jake and Jenny Fleming from Bozeman, Montana, joining us to talk about their $200 divorce. How the heck did you do it? The two of you dated on and off for about 5 years in your early 20s, married for 12. You have since been divorced for about 11 years. Give us a little more insight into the background of where you shared your life as musicians and what it was going to take to untangle that.
Oh, let's see. We got together it was 1996 in the fall. We started doing some music together, quickly fell in love, and we were bound then for the next 16 years. And, had a couple of breaks in there with the relationship, but really it all came together at the beginning. And it was a fabulous journey full of music and friendship and family, extended family between the two of our families, and a lot of friends and a lot of stage and locations and trips to other parts of the world. Nice trip to Norway at one point. And then eventually it came to a head. There was so much going on between us that we didn't navigate it so well. And we came to these terms of having to separate the whole thing. And when I found the paperwork, when it was decided we would split up, I looked up, okay, how do we do this? And get the papers going. It's called a cessation of marriage. So I ran with that.
Or dissolution.
Dissolution. That's what it was. It was the dissolution of marriage. So I didn't even call it a divorce for a little while. Just like, wow, that's nice. It's a dissolution of marriage. All right. Which was a nice way to frame it because of the context of divorce in society otherwise, And for me, it was something that I feared all of my life because of my parents. And I was sure I was going to be the one who succeeded at the marriage. But so divorce was kind of a word I avoided. So I found that a dissolution of marriage. This is nice.
I think that back to the question that Karen asked about our music, we did meet in our early 20s, and neither of us had really been, I guess we had some professional music jobs, but really we grew up together. We learned how to navigate the music business. We learned how to make a CD and promote it and take it on tour. And that was easily a 15, 16-year journey together. But we were children at the same time. And, we became adolescents in the music business together. And really, in our community, our small Montana community, we became young adults. And along the way, started teaching our students how to employ this practical music knowledge in the way that we were taught. So I think that even though we didn't have children together, those kinds of bonds that we created between each other, with our bandmates, and with our community were quite strong. I wouldn't say equally as strong as kids. I don't know what that feels like. I don't have kids. But they were quite strong. And I think when it came time for our divorce, I didn't anticipate how much time we would spend unraveling those bonds that we made as well.
Yeah. And Jake, you had mentioned, one of your fears as being an adult child of divorce was to not become a divorced person as well. And ironically, though, at the same time, you had some models. You actually had the visual illustrative stories of how divorce could be done differently. And Jenny, I want to start with you because you were the one coming into the Fleming family and what you saw and how that supported you and lifted you up as you were going through your own journey. And then we'll hear a little bit more about that inside perspective that you had, Jake, as a child of divorce.
Well, I come from a family, my parents are still together. Divorce isn't unheard of in my family, but it's pretty rare. And so meeting Jake's family for the first time, I was absolutely blown away. In fact, I might have called you and said, I just met this guy's family for the first time, and I've never seen anything like it. I was there for Christmas. They all gather for Christmas at his dad's house. His dad is remarried. And there are stepchildren. His wife has 3 kids. He had 2 kids, Jake and his brother. And Jake's mother and stepfather were there at his dad's house. And there's a wife in between with 2 kids. And she was there with her 2 kids. And I was flabbergasted that these people could all be in the same room, getting along. I think at one point, Jake's mother and father, who haven't been married for some time, were off together in the kitchen nook talking about who knows what. I just couldn't believe that this existed, that they could be so friendly and supportive and encouraging of each other. And I'm sure that much of their motivation were all these kids, to make sure that the kids felt safe and seen. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those kids went pretty freely between those 3 houses and felt equally as safe at all of them. So yeah, I remember calling you and just being amazed at this thing that I'd never seen before. And while you don't go into a marriage thinking, someday I'm going to have a really friendly, amicable divorce.
No one starts with that as
no
goal.
But I cannot discount how powerful it was to see, like you're saying, a different kind of divorce, that life doesn't end with divorce. And what I think is maybe even more important, marriages are not failures just because you get divorced. And in fact, I think Jake and I would agree, we had a pretty successful marriage. And then it was done. And it was time to move on. I think one of the harder things for us was knowing how successful our marriage was and that it was done. That was a hard thing to accept. I think that's probably why, Jake was saying that one of the hardest decisions around getting divorced was whether or not to get divorced. It took us a long time to get there. But seeing that that end goal in his family I think we both just knew that this wasn't going to be a divorce that was full of anger and vitriol. Just wasn't worth it. We wanted to skip to the model that we had seen. That's not to say that Jake didn't have, frustrations as a child of divorce, trying to see all of the parts and pieces of the family when we were there for Christmas. And he can tell you how frustrating it was to be a child of divorce. But not having come from divorce, I thought it was a pretty amazing example.
And Jake, what would you add to that perspective and sort of the end? I always say it's never too late to have a good divorce. Even the good ones are painful.
Yeah. Yeah. I would hope that everybody experiences some pain, some heartbreak, because if they don't, then they didn't have the love in the first place. And, as this child, I think I was 4 or 5 when that happened with my parents. And I didn't realize it. There was a lot about myself and my life, how I lived it, how I perceived relationships and really the world. Because of that split when I was so young. And these weren't things that I learned until, we were going through our divorce, and I looked into myself and talked to my parents about what was going on before I was born, what was going on, when they were getting their divorce, and what was my atmosphere? Because I wanted to understand it as an adult rather than the child that I was, and the trauma that I'd been working with all of my life. And all I know is that I grew up, I think that I tried to become the missing piece, my father that was gone now. And I was going to fill this gap with the solution, whatever that solution was. So over the rest of my life, just that split wasn't going to take place in my life. I was sure of that. However, I knew that it was possible. It was a huge fear. And I knew that if that happened, then it was not going to be worse than that moment. That moment itself. It was going to be a good situation. And I was going to continue to be friends with Jenny. And, and of course I wasn't thinking of this when I was 12. Like, if I get divorced, after I got married, I'm like, yeah, I would never do that. I would never get on the offensive here and have vitriol, regardless of the circumstances. And then the circumstances got pretty sticky, and I had an opportunity, to bank that up, but never would I have. And I think that is to speak to the examples that Jenny was describing, that my family did it with grace. And that's just who they were. They had kids, and my mom also had a lot of reasons to put in the bank to not want to have anything to do with my dad. And he told me later, he's like, that was you guys. When I left, I remember making a decision. He said, I'm not glad that I did make this decision, but I remember when I when I left, that I decided that if you guys didn't want to have anything to do with me, then that was going to be my lot. That's how it was going to be. So I didn't realize that I was abandoned. I never thought of it like that he was, but he did. He took off, and he was going to be okay with that. But I was not okay with that. So we wanted to see him, and Mom was good with that. They wanted to have this shared relationship. I think they had joint custody. And But I was always begging for more time with my dad. So always seeking the solution of togetherness, even when there's a part, when we're not together. I think I had a hope back then that maybe they would come. I did have a hope. I remember that feeling that maybe they'll come back together. Maybe it'll be back together. But over time, that didn't happen. And the wounds healed, or turned into scars. And I think all that plays into what then happened for Jenny and I when it was time for us to have our divorces. I already knew what to do character-wise and in my heart, and it was really just a matter of that. So when she said to me, I was ready to change and do whatever, and this was the pivotal turning point for me, where I finally let go and was able to be okay with the divorce. When she said, I love you and you're awesome, but I don't like myself with you. And I was like, well, okay, that's totally different. This isn't about me. This is about you. And if what I can do to help you is to get out of the way, then this is what we got to do. And it was really easy from there. So she said it was real, as Jenny said, and we discussed that it was really hard to decide to do that. And especially for me, because I never thought that that's something that I would do. But when she was able to very clearly identify that and know that this marriage was no longer a good place for her, then it was easy to let go. And okay, well, let's see what we got to do to do this. And then it was kind of like the same we always did, let's do a project together. The project is the divorce now. So let's get into it. And we did, I showed her the paper. Okay. And it was kind of felt like that same kind of collaborative way that we're really good at. That's what we're great collaborators. And we were great collaborators in music, we were great collaborators in marriage, and we were great collaborators in divorce, and we still remain good collaborators.
You do still work together, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Jenny, highlight both of you, just fill in the gaps for our listeners of what it was that you were unraveling as musicians, your assets, how many albums you had recorded together, you shared a name, you shared an audience. Help us paint a picture of that part of the before.
Well, we're from a pretty small town, a small mountain university town, the kind of town where you go down to Main Street and you cannot walk 5 feet without seeing someone and you have to talk to them because that's how you behave in a small town. So the audience that we built, this very loyal, supportive, encouraging audience that really came to every concert we ever gave, were super invested in Jake and I together as a couple. Part of I hate to even describe it like this, but part of our shtick on stage was the banter of a married couple. We'd tell these stories of how a song came to be, and it would start with, we had this, knockdown, drag out fight over how to load the dishwasher, and we didn't speak to each other for the rest of the day. And Jake wrote an apology song for it, and we put it on our album, and here it is. We just play, and so those kinds of stories were what people identified with and could relate to, and thus that's the bond that we built with our audience. There were 7 albums. There also was a bass player who was really integral to our success as musicians in this town. He's also from Bozeman. And our deep friendship with him. Our relationship with with the bass player is sibling. Like he is family for both of us. And so when we were trying to parse out the assets, part of it was, who takes the CDs, which, by the way, have my face on the front of all of them and my name. It was called the Jenny Fleming Trio. It's not as if Jake could go play concerts and sell CDs with my face on it. That would be a little strange.
Yeah. Only the back of my head made a CD cover and a cartoon image of me on it.
Yeah. And then there was a recording studio that we had built together. There was a nonprofit organization that we had started together. And there were these relationships that we had built with audience members and community members who really were on team Jake and Jenny. So when we split that up, God, we didn't know how to parse that, nor did we want to divide that up. We never wanted our friends to have to choose either him or me. We thought that was ridiculous. And again, with the models of divorce that we saw in his family, they didn't have to choose. They just all hung out together, and not without heartache, but they earned that right to all be in each other's presence for Christmas. And one of the ways we decided to kind of make that announcement to our community was by having a divorce party.
A divorce party. Well, listeners, as we head into our first break, you can simmer on that for a moment. Who has a celebration of marriage and a divorce party for their community? Jake and Jenny. If this conversation is resonating, there are tools to help you put it into practice. Grab my book, The Good Divorce: How to End Your Marriage Without Ending Your Family. It offers clear guidance for navigating divorce with intention and care, especially when kids are involved. And for ongoing support and education, you can join me at the Good Divorce Academy, which is my online community and classroom. And if you'd like to work with me directly, you're going to find more information at thegooddivorcecoach.com. Welcome back to the Good Divorce Show. I'm Karen McNinney, your host, and I'm chatting today with Jake and Jenny Fleming, who indeed have had a good divorce and are here to help us see a path that is less destructive. And even with less debt, we always associate divorces having to be this massive multi-year undertaking and lawyers and get on enemy lines, and you end up spending all your savings only to be left with despair and debt at the end. The two of you had a very different approach. Jake, you led the charge on paperwork. Tell us just a little bit about that and how you were able to do this for $200.
Yeah. All right. Well, when we decided to get divorced, I was really intimidated by it because of, what you just mentioned with the lawyers and the dragon. I didn't know. I didn't know what it would be. So I just went online and, filing for divorce in Montana. And there was a PDF to download. I thought, well, that's nice. And so I downloaded it and started looking at it, and there was definitely a lot there. And I tell people now, it's so much easier to get into a marriage on paper than to get out of a marriage.
Isn't that the truth?
And so they want to know everything, and as much of a nuisance as I thought it was, and still have the feelings about. It's a good exercise. It's a really good exercise to go back through your years together and identify, remember what you brought to the table, what they brought to the table, and what you gathered together. It's a nice way to reflect on your marriage. Although, when you're in that state of mind, it's not as easy. But thinking back on it now, I could see why it's required that couples should go through this exercise, not only just to divide the physical assets and the finances and all of that, but it helps to kind of clean all that up. It's a bit of a cleansing. So yeah, I did lead the charge with that, but really all that was downloading the form, and we both sat and filled it out. I still have some of the paperwork, like the thing I needed to hold on to for mortgage reasons and whatnot. It's got Jenny's handwriting on it. It's got some of my handwriting on it. And it really was quite easy. It's like, I don't know, maybe a little harder than going to the car dealership and filling out all that paperwork. Or, when we bought the house, the condo, we had somebody else fill out most of that paperwork for us. We just signed a bunch of forms. So it was somewhere in that zone of mortgage, car, divorce paperwork, but it certainly wasn't years and years of stuff. It didn't take long, and it didn't cost much. We just paid the filing fees. She didn't want anything from me. I didn't want anything from her, except just happiness, I guess, whatever was going to be post, just what, I don't know, it was all really natural for us.
It's important to note also that we didn't have children. We were self-employed musicians, which meant we didn't own very much. So there wasn't that much to split up.
And I just want to remind our listeners also, the two of you sitting here 11 years later seem very sentient, very grounded. It was the simple process. But I walked this journey with the two of you. And even though there was a decision day to court date of 5 months, there was a solid 3 years prior to that. That was, in my recollection,
horrible,
painful, disorienting, couples counseling, individual counseling. So remind people this is not bibbity bobbity boo.
No. And I think that was part of the image that we were willing to put out into the community, was that, we got this. We know what to do, but and I wouldn't say it was 3 years. I would say it was closer to 5 or 6 years that we really struggled behind closed doors. But the minute we stood on the stage, that went away because that wasn't part of our brand. It wasn't the image that we wanted to put out there. A fighting married couple on stage is not very saleable. So it was a solid 5 years in my mind that things started unraveling. And that's a very isolating feeling when out in the world in your small town community, people think that you are, this really strong, healthy couple. We even had like young people, younger musicians than us, say to us, your marriage is what we want. And we would think, oh my God, careful what you wish for, but only behind closed doors. So yeah. And Jake keeps saying, once we made the decision, then, we kind of knew what to do, but getting to that decision was long and tedious and arduous and really painful and heartbreaking. And Jake says that the hardest thing about getting divorced was deciding to get divorced. And it truly was.
And I have noticed that sometimes we just stay too long. There's love in these relationships. And so there's this dichotomy of thinking we have to blow everything up and destroy the love in order to justify the leaving. And that's something that the two of you really approached differently, which is to leave while there's still love.
Well, that was one thing that our therapist had said to us, and I'm so glad she did. I've never forgotten it. She said, once you enter into a sacred relationship, like a marriage or, something that you really have put in the most important spot in your life, Just because you decide to get divorced doesn't mean that the love goes anywhere. And that was part of the struggle for us. I mean, to be totally honest, I will always love Jake. That my whole life through, there will be part of me that absolutely loves him. I don't think that getting married was a mistake by any means. Like I said, I think our marriage was really successful. And then the time came for it to be done. But that she said that to us sort of gave me permission to hold both of those, hold that contradiction that, yeah, we need to get divorced. That this is not healthy for either of us anymore. Neither of us are happy. And I love you.
And that is a paradigm that is radical. And I think such an important message for our listeners and for individuals to recognize that it isn't an exclusive. And now we're getting divorced, so you will be my enemy. And I will avoid you in the grocery store. That does not have to be the story.
No, I really would attribute that to the genius of our therapist.
Mm-hmm. And Jake, you talk about the relationship with the parents and the students, this community again, that you and Jenny, as she said, people were really looking up to you to have such a public facing relationship and such a public facing career. Talk a little bit about that challenge of just talking about the divorce or feeling like you were letting people down and the pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of that was, of course, my whole experience is perceived from within, and then anything that I'm thinking other people might think may or may not be true, right?
Good point.
So it goes back to, it goes all the way back to the stuff I was mentioning earlier, about my growing and maturing perception from childhood and not wanting to fail. And part of that is personal and part of that is professional, because we were so intertwined.
And meshed might be the word you're looking for.
Meshed. It was all in there together, and we couldn't separate. I couldn't separate a personal from a professional, music from a marriage. And that was all one thing. So when it started to fall apart, when we started having troubles, and that 3 years was very painful. There was an event that marked this 3-year journey of starting with just the deepest ambiguity you can imagine about, well, what are we going to do? What do I want to do? What does she want to do? That going on for a while. And then having to make a decision. And it really felt like I just have to decide something one way or another. And I couldn't decide, and she couldn't decide. And it wasn't something she could help me decide, and I couldn't help her decide. So it was an impossible situation. It was very difficult, and that was very painful. And we decided to stay together. And then it got good for a little while, and then it just tanked again. So those were those 3 years. And during that time, we kept all of it on the down low. So when I talked about, when I was talking about the difficulty with the public and the parents of the students, that started in that 3-year period of marriage explosion to up until the divorce. Had no problem announcing, that this was going to come to a close now, that the marriage was going to end and there was going to be a divorce. It was the part before, when we had an explosion and I needed to retreat to Mexico for a month. I couldn't bring myself to calling my students' parents myself and communicating to them, because I knew I was just going to lose it on the phone. And I would not be able to speak through my pain. And that was my reality. And I knew that. And so we got somebody to help us out with that and to do our communicating for us. And it was off-putting. for some of them, for some of the parents who were like, well, we're your friends and your clients. You should have let us know. Don't really like how you handled that. And I was like, sorry, that's how I had to handle it. That
was the best we could do at the time.
Yeah. And so, yes, I did end up letting a couple of people down. But at the time, I took care of myself. And I'm glad that I did, because I wasn't married to them. I wasn't in business necessarily with them. They were my client. You're always going to lose a few clients. That's okay. So yeah, it was difficult. And this show is about how to remain positive through the whole experience, and not, I would say, not so much about solutions or here's how you do it, but because those situations are impossible. You don't know how to do it. And I remember somebody telling me back then, during that, and it was actually down in Mexico. We met up with some friends down there coincidentally, and we were talking about this, and they had been divorced, and he was down there. He had brought his ex-wife and the child they shared together down to Mexico, and we ran into each other on the beach. It was very serendipitous. And we started talking, and my head was spinning. Like, what does this mean? Is the whole marriage going to change? Am I going to start to have to wrap my head around new ways, new relationships, new ways of being in the marriage? I had no idea, but what he said was, there's all kinds of ways that it can be, and was speaking to that love that's always there that was being discussed here earlier. It's a relationship, and it can take a lot of shapes, and it can take a lot of forms, and
those shapes and forms are decided by the two people in the relationship. I think that's the other piece. Like, we're so swayed by what other people think a marriage should look like, or any kind of relationship,
or what a divorce should look like,
right?
Yeah. And how it should be handled and communicated. And I really think that is so accurate in reminding people to not allow their divorce to be hijacked by family members, friends, their community, lawyers. It's a story that those two people are writing, and you can decide how you want to write that story.
Yeah.
Tell me about the day you went to court. Can the two of you share that story together?
Yeah.
Well, the night before we went to court, we had a divorce party. Maybe we should start there.
That was even before. Yes. Yeah. Who has a divorce party? And what was the genesis idea of why you did this? And then what did it look like?
Well, Jake was saying how difficult it was to tell our students that we were going to Mexico. We were having problems, and we needed some time away to really put everything on the table. Oh, that was a really hard thing to say to, especially people kids who are looking up to you. Well, we felt similarly about our community. There were audience members who, were so in support of us as a couple. And we just imagined going to the grocery store and running into 5 people and having to have 5 separate conversations about, yes, we are getting divorced, and no, we're not angry with each other. We feel like our marriage was a success, and this is the next chapter. Like, having to have that conversation over and over and over just sounded like a living hell. So we decided to have this party at a local restaurant, a bar.
Let there be drinking.
Oh, yeah. And we put an invitation out on Facebook. And, we tried to really word the invitation like, our marriage is coming to an end, but the next chapter is beginning, and we'd love for you to come down and talk to us and celebrate the next chapter that's coming, because we were willing to have that conversation 200 times in one night. We just weren't willing to have it 200 times for the next 200 nights.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened. I think like 300 people showed up. I remember one of the owners of the bar being a little panicked that there were. I think people came, though, mostly to just witness the carnage, or what they thought was going to be the carnage. And I mean, it was so goofy. Jake and I ended up wearing the same outfit totally on accident.
No.
Yes.
And for those people who are finding themselves with a little more expense than we had with just some filing fees, maybe do throw a divorce party and charge a cover. Raise some funds.
You're gonna need it.
And like Jenny was saying, just to have them all in the same place. And she said to have the conversation 200 times in one night. But my hope was that I wouldn't have to have it really at all. That the party was the conversation, the energy, the vibe. She's there, I'm there. We can hug each other.
Our families were there,
and they'll understand.
Our friends were there. Our bandmates were there. Yeah, that does set a certain tone. And there was drinking, and that was really poor planning on our part, because the next morning we had to be in court at 8 o'clock or for a musician. That's an ungodly early.
You're right. You had a morning date with a judge.
Oh God. I think I went to bed at 4. We showed up at the court. Yeah.
Tell us the rest of that morning before we head into our next break.
Oh, that was fun. We went in there and we sat together, and it was just kind of, one of those hearings that there are multiple things going on. There's
it was family court. So there were
all family court,
like custody hearings, and just parents in absolute distress, and lots of people crying and just looking so angry. And here we were,
hungover from your divorce party,
totally
hanging out together,
sitting together, like probably telling jokes. And we were last on the docket. So we had to sit through all of this super sad, depressing stuff before we got to our divorce hearing.
We didn't know we were last. We kept waiting for our name to be called, and we're just waiting, and everyone's receiving their fines and their sentences, and we're just waiting, the decisions, which was really interesting to watch. But it also felt kind of nice that, we weren't busted up, like they were. We're like, hey, we seem to be in pretty good shape as we sit and with others who are going through something a little more difficult than we were that day. And we were last. And then,
so Jake got called up. You had to go to the stand and
she asked us,
sit behind who wants to do this? And
she's like, I need one of you to take the stand. Do you want to? And I looked at Jenny, and she's like, you go. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds right. I'll go.
So, she went through her, whatever, all the questions that you have to ask. Are you both in agreement? Blah, blah, blah. And then at the very end, she says, Mr. and Mrs. Fleming, will you please approach the bench? And I thought, the only reason I know what that means is because of TV. I've seen it on TV.
Approach the bench.
I know. So we walk up there right in front of her, and she pushed the microphone aside so that it wouldn't record her. All of this gets recorded, I don't know, for public record or something. And she pushes the mic aside, and she says to us, I've been a fan of your music for 10 years. I really love what you do. And it's not often that I get to preside over such an amicable divorce. And I hope that this means that you guys will continue to make music together. And for the judge to go out of her way and say that to a couple who just got divorced, I think was pretty, we smiled. We were appreciative for those words.
It was a huge affirmation.
Yeah. So after Oh,
Yes,
go ahead.
afterwards.
After the hearing, we went out to breakfast with a couple of friends and a bottle of champagne. And we knew the waiter pretty well. Again, small town. And we said, "Hey, can you pop this bottle of champagne for us?" And he says, "Oh, what's the special occasion?" And Jake and I said, "We just got divorced." And the look on his face, but like a second later, he says, "That's great." And he poured a glass for himself, and we all toasted at the table. And it was the weirdest, most bizarre breakfast scene.
And yet, maybe that's what we need to be normalizing, is that the love and the relationship can transcend. The marriage ended, but the relationship didn't. And certainly the music relationship didn't. And when we come back from our break, we're going to hear about Jake and Jenny's journey over the last 11 years as their families have continued to stand side by side, how they've continued to be collaborators musically and share the stage of not only their life, but also their music. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Welcome back to The Good Divorce Show. I'm your host, Karen, talking with Jake and Jenny today. Married 12 years, have since been divorced 11. And they had a very active business relationship together, musicians, label. And one of your stories you just shared before the break was the judge taking you aside at the bench and saying, "I hope that you will find a way to keep making music." And indeed, you have both continued to make music together and separately. Tell us a bit about how that moved forward, Jenny.
We had worked so closely for so many years, doing 7 albums together and touring the country with the trio and some other ensembles as well. And when we got divorced, I knew that there had to be some kind of separation. That group that we started together, I think it just, at that time, at that very emotional time of just having split up, it would have been, I think, too much for me to try and navigate that group together. So we took a break on that one. But we continued to play in other bands together. There was a couple cover bands that we were part of, that Jake is still part of. And that was fine because there was no sort of emotional investment, if you will, in a cover band.
Well, and then there's a twist in the story. As you continue to make music, your lives move on and you also start building new relationships. And one of those relationships that came into your new paradigm was another musician. Jenny, you fall in love.
Well, okay, let's just tell this in order. Jake and I did say when we got divorced, we're like, okay, we know there's going to be a time when both of us are going to move on. And we were playing together still in some bands and seeing each other quite often. And so we made an agreement that we would come to the other when the time was right. Not like I have a date tonight. We don't need to know that about each other, but I've taken this relationship to the next level and you need to know. And Jake was the first that he came to me and said, I'm ready to move forward with this relationship. And I think what was interesting, I might have even said this to you, Karen, but I do remember talking to a girlfriend saying, you never know how you're going to feel when that comes up, when your ex-husband says, I've fallen in love with someone else. You very well could be overcome with jealousy or sadness or, I don't know, a million horrible.
Oh, it's so complicated. And you don't know. It's not like I want this person back. I want that marriage back. But there's another layer of grief that sort of gets peeled away that, they are moving on and there may be a more of a happiness somewhere else than what we were able to have. And that is a grief.
For sure. But I think that I was so relieved when he came to me and said that he had found someone, my overwhelming response was that I was happy for him. And I think I also knew that he wouldn't have told me that if it wasn't someone that he was super serious with. And this is the woman he ended up having his daughter with. I also, as long as I've known Jake, he has wanted to have kids. And to be totally transparent, this was an annual fight that we would have, that I never wanted children and he always wanted children. And the fight got bigger and bigger every year. And I knew that I couldn't go there. And I had the uterus. So the buck stopped with me. And so when he told me, in fact, I think we ended up driving together to a gig out of town. And that's when he told me that they were pregnant. And I think that's when you know that you actually do love someone. All I could feel for him was happiness, because I knew it was something that he had wanted his whole life, and I couldn't give it to him. So yes, then it was my turn to come to him and say, okay, I've found someone now that I really am clicking with, and you know him. Jake immediately started guessing who it was.
Is it la la la? Is it no no no?
Like,
did I
nope.
guess, or did you?
Nope.
You told me.
And
No,
when I told you, you were super surprised.
Yeah, I did not see it coming. He was somebody we were working with. He was playing in a band with us. I'd known him for a long time. It's her partner now, Johnny, and I had my own friendship with him, and he didn't tell me, and she didn't tell me, and they'd been doing that, but it felt really cool. I was like, all right. But to find out it was somebody who was already in my circle of friends, somebody whose heart I felt like I already knew, and somebody who I knew was going to be devoted, to Jenny and looking out for her heart and loving her. That was a huge relief, because it could have been anybody in the world, but to find out that it was somebody who was grounded in goodness and in music as well, and a bass player, a real backbone, that made me very happy.
And what I really hear both of you, celebrating for each other is that you found that next chapter. Like you said, our marriage, we learned so many skills in our marriage together. We grew as young adults into adults and professionals, and then it was complete. And then there was a next chapter. And for you, it was fatherhood. And Jenny, you have a relationship, Jake's partner, Crystal, and wife, Betty. Tell me where Betty sits in your life.
Oh, I just, when Jake told me he was pregnant, I just could imagine how fulfilling that must have been for him. And I loved that kid before she was born. And then she was born and she looks just like him. All the baby pictures that I'd ever seen of Jake, that was Betty. And, I know that I'm never going to have kids. And I feel I have some students that I spend time with for years on end, and I end up feeling kind of maternal towards them, or protective. And that was how I felt about Betty the minute I met her. I felt like her aunt. And again, with the model of good divorce from Jake's family, I knew that I could play that part in her life. I don't doubt that she will always be in my life in some way.
It's really extraordinary. As we head towards the end of our time today, I want to ask both of you what you know now that you wish you had known before through this process, and any advice that you would give to our listeners to really be thoughtful about as they pursue their own good divorce journey.
It just occurred to me, I was thinking about this question and wondering what I could possibly say, but it just occurred to me that what I wish I could have had faith in is that I'm inside of me and through all of it, my life, the marriage, the divorce, starting the divorce, that I'm Jake, I am who I am. And the same thing that caused me to fall in love, the same being, the same heart, that caused me to fall in love with Jenny and get into the relationship and make great music with her. That's the same thing, the same essence, the same being that I can rely on to get me through the divorce. And to have faith in that, because you lose yourself. I think everybody loses themselves and they have to get to know themselves again, somewhere post. And now after 11 years, I realized that is dead on and true. And that I did lose myself. I'd lost track of who I was. And that was part of what didn't work in the marriage. And then I slowly gained that back. And by being a father and resetting my life. And now I'm launching into the next phase of my career. And it's wonderful. And I wish that I could have had this same sense of, hey, trust your heart.
What's so funny is that I'm listening to Jake talk about it. And I'm thinking this is so similar to what I would have said. And what I would have said to myself 11 years ago was that you can do this. One of the best pieces of advice that Jake and I were ever given was by his dad when we were just engaged. He said, you need to promise each other to find new ways to love each other. And when you're in your 20s, you think it's like, keep a date night and keep it interesting. And now that we're divorced 11 years, this is the new way that we have found to love each other. Sometimes you need distance, enough distance between each other. This is the amount of distance that we needed to continue to love each other in a new way.
So beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And if you're going to fight for something, fight for simplicity. Make it easy. Don't try to make things harder than they are. It's hard. Take it easy on yourself, and then maybe it'll be easier for the other person. I would assume anyone listening to this program wants it to be easy for themselves, at least. So start there. And if the other person giving you a hard time, maybe they'll follow your lead.
I think behavior is contagious. And the two of you brought your best self to the effort of your divorce journey, your marriage, and now your post-divorce relationship. Jake and Jenny Fleming, truly a model of a good divorce journey. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, your story, your insights. And your music is still out there, so people can find you and celebrate the musical gifts that you brought to each other. So grateful to all of our listeners today for tuning in. May you find your path to a good divorce. And remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.